The wounded hawk fell from the sky like a stone wrapped in feathers, landing just 3 feet from where Lily Fairchild knelt beside the creek washing her father's shirts, and she knew immediately that if she did not act, the beautiful creature would be dead before sunset. She dropped the wet fabric into the basket and moved carefully toward the hawk, speaking in the low, soothing tones her mother had used years ago when gentling frightened animals. The bird's left wing hung at an unnatural angle, and a gash across its breast leaked blood into the dust. Its fierce golden eyes tracked her movements, but it lacked the strength to flee. Lily removed her shawl and draped it gently over the hawk's head, calming it in darkness as she had seen her mother do with injured barn owls. With careful hands, she lifted the bird and cradled it against her chest, feeling the rapid flutter of its heartbeat through the thin cotton of her blouse. The walk back to her father's ranch took nearly 20 minutes, and by the time she pushed through the kitchen door, her arms ached from holding the hawk steady. Her father looked up from his ledger, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Lily, what in God's name?" "It fell from the sky, Papa. I cannot just let it die." She laid the hawk on the kitchen table, keeping the shawl draped over its head. "I need clean cloth, water, and some of that whiskey you keep hidden behind the flour sacks." Thomas Fairchild stood slowly, his joints protesting after hours at his desk. "Your mother would have done the same thing," he said quietly, and fetched what she needed. Lily worked through the afternoon, cleaning the wound with careful precision, splinting the wing with thin strips of wood, and binding it with strips of cloth torn from an old petticoat. The hawk remained still beneath the shawl, as though it understood she meant to help. When she finally lifted the covering from its head, those golden eyes fixed on her face with an intelligence that seemed almost human. She built a nest of blankets in a wooden crate and settled the hawk inside, placing it in the corner of the kitchen where the warmth from the stove would keep it comfortable through the cool Arizona night. It was May of 1884, and Oro Blanco, Arizona was beginning to feel the first whispers of summer heat. The small town sat nestled in the mountains, not far from the Mexican border, a place where silver mining had brought fortune to some and heartbreak to many others. Lily's father had been one of the fortunate ones, selling his claim at the right time and purchasing a ranch where he raised horses that were prized throughout the territory. But fortune had not protected them from the fever that took Lily's mother 3 years earlier, leaving father and daughter to manage the property with the help of 2 ranch hands who slept in the bunkhouse and rarely ventured into the main house. Lily was 22 years old, with dark auburn hair that she wore in a practical braid down her back, and green eyes that her father said came from her Irish grandmother. She had her mother's gift with animals, a gentle patience that seemed to communicate something wordless and profound. In the 3 years since her mother's death, she had saved a coyote pup caught in a trap, nursed a foundering mare back to health, and spent 2 weeks caring for a barn cat that had been kicked by a mule. The hawk was her most ambitious project yet. She checked on the bird every few hours, offering it water on a cloth she pressed gently to its beak, relieved when it finally drank. By the second day, she had managed to get it to eat small pieces of raw meat, cut into strips thin enough for its wounded state. Her father watched these ministrations with a mixture of pride and worry, knowing his daughter's tender heart would break if the hawk did not survive. On the third day, a stranger rode up to the ranch, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Lily was in the yard hanging laundry when she heard the hoofbeats, and she paused with her father's shirt in her hands, watching as the man dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. "Morning, miss," he called, touching the brim of his hat. "I am looking for Thomas Fairchild. Heard he might have work for a man good with horses." Lily set down the shirt and walked toward him, drying her hands on her apron. "My father is in the barn. I will take you to him." The cowboy fell into step beside her, leading his horse with the reins loose in his hand. "I am James Irving. Most folks call me James. Lily Fairchild." She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, noting the way he moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of competence rather than arrogance. Where do you come from? Texas, originally. Been working my way west for the past few years. Heard Oro Blanco was a good place to settle, and your father has a reputation for breeding fine horses. He paused as they neared the barn. Also heard he has a daughter who can heal just about anything with four legs. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. People exaggerate, do they? There was something warm in his voice, a hint of amusement that made her glance up and catch him smiling at her. I will keep that in mind. Her father emerged from the barn before she could respond, and she left the two men to their discussion while she returned to her laundry. But she found herself glancing toward the barn more often than necessary, watching as James demonstrated his skill with a young gelding that had been proving difficult to break. He moved with the same patience she used with injured creatures, never forcing, always listening to what the horse was telling him. By the time the sun reached its zenith, her father had offered James a position, and the cowboy was settling his belongings into the bunkhouse. That evening, as Lily checked on the hawk, she heard a knock at the kitchen door. She opened it to find James standing on the step, his hat in his hands. Hope I am not intruding, miss. Your father mentioned you had an injured bird. I have some experience with hawks from my time in Texas. Thought I might be able to help. She hesitated only a moment before stepping aside to let him enter. The kitchen smelled of the stew she had made for dinner, and the warmth from the stove filled the room with comfortable heat. James followed her to the crate in the corner, kneeling beside it to examine the hawk with careful attention. Red-tailed hawk, he said quietly. Beautiful bird. You splinted the wing well. How did you learn to do this? My mother taught me. She had a gift with animals. Lily knelt beside him, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. She said everything deserves a chance to heal if someone is willing to take the time. James looked at her then, his blue eyes serious. That is a rare kind of wisdom. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the hawk as it shifted in its nest of blankets. Finally, James reached out and gently ran his finger along the bird's back, following the line of its feathers with a touch so light it barely bent them. The hawk remained calm, its eyes half closed. You have a healer's hands, James said, his voice soft. That is a gift worth more than silver or gold. Something shifted in Lily's chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen stove. She looked at James's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. Thank you, she managed, and was surprised by how unsteady her voice sounded. He turned his head, and their eyes met in the lamplight. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then James cleared his throat and stood, offering his hand to help her rise. I should let you get back to your evening, but if you need any help with the hawk, I am just across the yard. After he left, Lily stood in the kitchen with her hand pressed to her chest, feeling the rapid beating of her heart. She told herself it was simply surprise at having someone understand her work with animals, someone who did not think her strange for spending hours caring for creatures that most people would have left to die. But when she lay in bed that night, it was James's voice she heard in her mind, those words spoken with such gentle certainty. You have a healer's hands. The hawk improved slowly over the following days, growing stronger as its wounds began to heal. James stopped by the kitchen each evening after finishing his work with the horses, ostensibly to check on the bird's progress, but Lily noticed the way his visits grew longer, the way their conversations drifted from hawks and horses to stories of their lives. She learned that James had lost his mother young, that he had worked on his father's ranch until the older man remarried, and James decided to seek his own way in the world. He had been a cavalry scout for a brief time, had driven cattle up the Chisholm Trail, had seen more of the territory than Lily could imagine. In turn, she told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's death and the hollow space it had left in their lives, about her dreams of one day having land of her own where she could care for injured animals. James listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he truly heard what she was saying, that her words mattered to him. You should do it, he said one evening as they sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The hawk had graduated to a larger cage that allowed it to hop from one perch to another, testing its healing wing. Find land and start your sanctuary. Animals need someone like you. It is just a dream, Lily said, though her heart quickened at hearing him speak of it as something possible. Women do not just buy land and start ranches. Some do. James turned to look at her, his expression serious. You are stronger than you think, Lily Fairchild. I have watched you work. You do not give up on anything once you have decided it deserves saving. She met his eyes, feeling that same warmth spread through her chest. Is that how you see me? That is exactly how I see you. He held her gaze for a long moment, then looked away, his jaw tightening as though he was fighting some internal battle. You should know that I am falling in love with you. I have tried not to. You are my employer's daughter, and I have no right to think beyond my position here. But I cannot help it. Every time I see you with that hawk, every time you smile at something I have said, I fall a little harder. Lily's breath caught in her throat. In the gathering darkness, she could barely make out his features, but she could hear the raw honesty in his voice, the vulnerability it cost him to speak those words. James, you do not have to say anything, he interrupted quickly. I just needed you to know. I could not keep pretending I only come to the kitchen to check on a bird. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I am glad you told me, because I have been trying to find reasons to be wherever you are. I watch for you in the mornings. I listen for your voice in the yard. When you are near, everything feels brighter somehow. James's fingers tightened around hers. Lily. Her name was barely a whisper. I think I am falling in love with you too, she said, and felt his hand tremble in hers. He lifted their joined hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with sudden tears. I do not have much to offer you, just a cowboy's wages and a willingness to work hard. But if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. That is more than enough, Lily said, and leaned forward to kiss him. His lips were warm and soft, and when he wrapped his arms around her, she felt safe in a way she had not felt since her mother died. They sat together on the porch as the stars emerged overhead, talking quietly about the future they might build together, about possibilities that suddenly seemed within reach. The next morning, Lily woke early and went to check on the hawk. The bird stood on its perch, the splinted wing extended carefully as it stretched. She could see how much stronger it had become, how the fire had returned to its golden eyes. It would not be long before she would need to let it go, to give it back the freedom it had lost when it fell from the sky. The thought filled her with both sadness and pride. She had saved its life, but the true gift would be in releasing it. James found her in the kitchen an hour later, standing by the hawk's cage with tears on her cheeks. He did not ask why she was crying. He simply wrapped his arms around her from behind and held her while she mourned the approaching loss. It will remember you, he said quietly. Some part of it will always remember that you saved it. That afternoon, Lily's father asked to speak with both of them in his study. She and James exchanged nervous glances as they followed Thomas Fairchild into the book-lined room, unsure what to expect. The older man settled into his chair and gestured for them to sit. I am not blind, Thomas said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I have seen the way you two look at each other. James, you are a good man and a hard worker. If my daughter has chosen you, then I am pleased, but I need to know your intentions. James straightened in his chair, meeting Thomas's gaze directly. I love your daughter, sir. I would like your permission to court her properly, and if she will have me, to marry her. Thomas nodded slowly. Lily, is this what you want? Yes, Papa, Lily said, reaching for James's hand. It is. Then you have my blessing. Thomas stood and extended his hand to James, who rose to shake it. I will warn you that my daughter has a mind of her own and a stubborn streak that rivals any mule I have ever owned. She will not be content simply keeping house and raising babies, though I hope she will do both in time. She will want her sanctuary for injured animals. Can you live with that? James smiled, and Lily felt her heart swell at the warmth in his expression. Sir, that is one of the many reasons I love her. I would never ask her to be anything less than who she is. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Oro Blanco, with half the town in attendance and the other half waiting outside for the celebration that would follow. Lily wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slimmer frame, and carried wildflowers that James had picked that morning in the meadow beyond the ranch. When the minister asked if James would take Lily to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong. And when it was Lily's turn, she spoke the words with absolute certainty. They honeymooned in Tucson for 3 days, staying in a hotel that felt impossibly luxurious after the simplicity of ranch life. James made love to her with the same patience and gentleness he showed the horses, learning what made her gasp and sigh, taking his time to ensure her pleasure matched his own. Lily discovered that passion could be both fierce and tender, that giving herself to someone she loved created an intimacy deeper than anything she had imagined. On their final night in Tucson, as they lay tangled together in the hotel bed, James traced circles on her bare shoulder and said, I have been thinking about your dream, the sanctuary for injured animals. Lily turned to look at him, her hair spilling across the pillow. What about it? Your father mentioned there is a parcel of land adjacent to the ranch, 20 acres with a creek running through it. He said if we wanted it, he would sell it to us at a fair price. Let us pay it off over time. James paused, his blue eyes serious. We could build a house there, set up pens and shelters for animals, make your dream real. Tears filled Lily's eyes. James, that would take years to pay for. Then we will take years. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I told you I would spend my life making you happy. This is how I want to start. They returned to Oro Blanco with plans forming in their minds, sketching ideas on paper during the long journey home. For the first 6 months of their marriage, they lived in a small cabin on her father's ranch while they worked to improve the land they were buying. James continued working with the horses, but he spent every spare moment building fences and shelters, creating spaces where injured animals could heal safely. The hawk had been released 2 weeks before the wedding, its wing fully healed. Lily had carried it to the meadow in the early morning, opened the cage, and watched it burst into flight with a cry that echoed across the valley. It had circled 3 times overhead before flying toward the mountains, and she had stood watching until it disappeared from sight, James's arm around her waist. Thank you, she had whispered, though she was not sure if she was speaking to the hawk, to the universe, or to the man beside her. By the following spring, their house was complete, a simple but sturdy structure with 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Lily planted a garden while James finished the last of the animal pens, and in April they took in their first patient, a coyote that had been shot by a rancher and left to die. The bullet had missed its vital organs, but shattered its front leg. Lily spent weeks caring for the coyote, earning its trust slowly, patiently. James built a special pen with a sheltered den where the animal could feel safe. The rancher who had shot it stopped by one day to see what the fuss was about, expecting to mock the young couple for their foolishness. Instead, he stood silent at the fence, watching Lily change the coyote's bandages while the animal lay calm beneath her hands. I will be damned, the rancher said quietly. She really does have a gift. Word spread through Oro Blanco and the surrounding ranches. A shepherd brought a dog that had tangled with a mountain lion. A farmer's daughter arrived with an owl that had flown into a barn beam. A prospector carried in a raven with a broken beak. Lily treated them all, and James built more pens, more shelters, expanding their sanctuary to accommodate the growing need. They did not charge for their services, though grateful people often left donations, food, or supplies. Thomas Fairchild watched his daughter's dream take shape with quiet pride, occasionally mentioning that the land debt was nearly paid, that they were doing better than he had dared hope. In the summer of 1885, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told James one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, the same way they had sat together the night he first confessed his love. His reaction was everything she had hoped for: pure joy followed by immediate concern for her health, promises to do whatever was needed to make her comfortable, and a tenderness in his touch that made her cry happy tears. Their son was born in March of 1886, arriving during a late season snowstorm that blanketed the mountains in white. The labor was long and difficult, but James never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Lily's arms, James looked down at them both with such love in his eyes that Lily fell in love with him all over again. They named the boy Daniel, after James's father, and he grew into a sturdy child with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. By the time Daniel was walking, he was following his parents around the sanctuary, learning to be gentle with the injured creatures, developing his mother's patient touch. The hawk returned in the spring of 1887, 3 years after Lily had released it. She was in the yard hanging laundry while Daniel played in the grass nearby when she heard the distinctive cry. She looked up to see the red-tailed hawk circling overhead, and her heart leaped with recognition. The bird descended to land on the fence post 20 feet away, watching her with those same golden eyes. James came out of the barn at her call, stopping short when he saw the hawk. "Is that—" "Yes," Lily breathed. "I am sure of it." They stood together watching the hawk, which seemed content to perch and observe them. After several minutes, it took flight again, circling once more before heading toward the mountains. But it returned the next day, and the day after that, establishing a pattern that would continue for years. The hawk had its freedom, its wildlife, but some part of it remembered the woman who had saved it, and it came back to visit the place where it had healed. Life settled into a rhythm that felt right. The sanctuary continued to grow, and James's reputation as a horseman brought additional income that allowed them to expand their home, adding 2 more bedrooms in anticipation of future children. Lily gave birth to a daughter in 1888, a girl they named Rose, who had her father's blue eyes and a fierce determination that showed itself from her earliest days. The children grew up surrounded by animals, learning to value all life, to approach even the most frightened creatures with patience and respect. Daniel showed his father's skill with horses, while Rose developed her mother's healing touch. On summer evenings, the family would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the mountains, and James would tell stories of his travels while Lily mended clothes and the children played at their feet. In 1890, the territory of Arizona was growing and changing, becoming more settled, more civilized. Oro Blanco had grown from a rough mining town into a proper community with a school, a church, and regular mail service. Thomas Fairchild, now in his 60s, decided to deed his ranch to Lily and James, saying it was time for the younger generation to take over. The gesture meant they now controlled nearly 100 acres of prime land, enough to support both the horse breeding operation and Lily's sanctuary. James threw himself into managing the expanded property with the same dedication he brought to everything. He hired additional ranch hands, men who understood that working for the Irvings meant respecting the sanctuary and the animals within it. The sanctuary itself had become something of a local attraction, with school children coming to see the recovering animals and learn about caring for wildlife. One afternoon in late summer, a stranger rode up to the sanctuary, leading a horse with an injured leg. The man was older, weathered by sun and hard living, and something in his bearing suggested he had not come simply for veterinary help. He dismounted slowly and approached James, who was working on reinforcing a fence. "You James Irving?" the stranger asked. "I am." James set down his tools and straightened, his eyes cautious. "What can I do for you?" Name is Samuel Irving. I am your uncle, your father's brother. The man pulled off his hat, revealing silver hair and eyes the same shade of blue as James's own. I have been looking for you for near about 5 years now. Got word you might be in Oro Blanco. James went very still. My father told me all his family was dead. Your father and I had a falling out many years ago. I left Texas and went to California, but I have been thinking lately about family, about mistakes made and time wasted. When I heard through some ranch hands that there was a James Irving in Arizona territory, skilled with horses and married to a woman who healed animals, I thought it might be you. Samuel paused, his voice roughening with emotion. I came to see if you would be willing to meet your uncle, maybe hear his side of old stories. I do not expect anything from you, boy, just a chance to know my brother's son. Lily had come out of the house during this exchange, and she caught James's eye, giving him a small, encouraging nod. James studied his uncle for a long moment, then extended his hand. You had better come inside. We can talk over coffee. Samuel Irving stayed for 3 days, and by the time he left, the breach between past and present had begun to heal. He told James stories about his father as a young man, about the Irving family history, about the argument that had driven the brothers apart over a woman neither of them ultimately married. He admired the sanctuary, praised Lily's skill with animals, and bounced Daniel and Rose on his knee while telling them tales of California goldfields. Before Samuel rode out, he pressed an envelope into James's hand. There is information in there about some land I own in California. If anything happens to me, it is yours. I have no children of my own, and family should go to family. James tried to refuse, but Samuel insisted. You have built something good here, James. Your father would have been proud even if he never knew how to say it. Let me do this one thing. Let me be the uncle I should have been years ago. After Samuel left, James held Lily close and whispered, How do you do it? How do you heal even the broken pieces of a man's past? I do not do anything, Lily said, touching his face gently. You did that yourself by being willing to forgive, to give him a chance. That is its own kind of healing. The years continued to roll forward, bringing both joy and sorrow. Thomas Fairchild died peacefully in his sleep in 1893, and Lily grieved the loss of the father who had supported her dreams and welcomed James as a son. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch beneath a cottonwood tree where he had proposed to Lily's mother 40 years earlier. A third child arrived in 1894, another son they named Thomas after Lily's father. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved to read and showed an unexpected talent for drawing, filling tablets with sketches of the animals in the sanctuary. Lily encouraged his artistic nature while teaching him the same lessons about patience and respect for life that she had taught his siblings. The sanctuary had become renowned throughout southern Arizona. Veterinarians sometimes sent difficult cases to Lily, recognizing her unique gift for working with traumatized or injured animals. She had developed techniques for calming frightened creatures, for treating wounds without causing additional stress, for knowing when an animal was ready to return to the wild. The red-tailed hawk still visited, though less frequently as the years passed. Each time it appeared, Lily felt a deep satisfaction, a confirmation that the work she did mattered, that every life she had saved went on to live fully in the world. In 1896, Samuel Irving died of a heart attack in Sacramento, and true to his word, he had left his California land to James. The property included a small ranch and 40 acres, which James sold and used the money to expand the sanctuary, building a proper clinic with surgical facilities and recovery rooms. Lily trained 2 young women from Oro Blanco in basic animal care, creating the beginning of what would eventually become a formal operation with staff and regular hours. On their 15th wedding anniversary, James took Lily back to Tucson, staying in the same hotel where they had spent their honeymoon. They walked through the town, now grown bustling and modern, and marveled at how much had changed. But when James pulled her close and kissed her beneath the stars, it felt exactly the same as it had 15 years earlier. That same warmth and certainty, that same deep love. Do you ever regret it? James asked as they lay in bed that night. Marrying a cowboy instead of someone who could have given you an easier life? Lily propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight that streamed through the window. James Irving, you gave me everything I ever dreamed of and more. You helped me build a sanctuary. You have been a wonderful father to our children. You have loved me through good times and hard times, and you have never once asked me to be anything other than myself. How could I possibly regret that? He pulled her down to kiss her, slow and deep, and she felt the familiar heat rise between them, the passion that had only grown stronger over the years. They made love with the comfortable intimacy of long marriage, knowing exactly how to please each other, and afterward Lily lay in his arms feeling perfectly content. Daniel left for college in Tucson in 1899, planning to study veterinary medicine so he could return and help his mother run the sanctuary with proper scientific training. Rose, now 11, had already declared her intention to follow in her brother's footsteps, though she wanted to focus on wild animals specifically. Thomas, at 5, was still too young to know his path, but he spent hours watching the creatures in the sanctuary, capturing their essence in his drawings with surprising skill. The new century arrived with celebration in Oro Blanco, and the Irving family gathered with the rest of the town to watch fireworks and toast the year 1900. Lily stood with James's arm around her waist, surrounded by their children, and reflected on how much her life had changed since that day 16 years earlier when a wounded hawk had fallen from the sky. She had been alone then, grieving her mother, uncertain of her future. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, 3 remarkable children, and work that fulfilled her in ways she had never imagined possible. The sanctuary treated over 100 animals each year, releasing most of them back into the wild once they had healed, keeping only those too damaged to survive on their own. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, leaning down to speak quietly near her ear. "About hawks and healing," Lily said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "About how one injured bird changed everything." "That bird brought me to you," James said. "Or maybe you brought me to the bird. Either way, I am grateful." The years of the new century brought continued growth and change. Daniel graduated from veterinary school in 1903 and returned to Oro Blanco, bringing with him new techniques and medicines that enhanced his mother's intuitive healing. Together, they expanded the sanctuary into a true wildlife rehabilitation center, one of the first of its kind in the Arizona territory. Rose followed her brother to college in 1906, studying biology and animal behavior with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. Thomas discovered that his artistic talent could be combined with scientific illustration, and his detailed drawings of animal anatomy began appearing in medical journals, bringing recognition to the family name. Through it all, James remained the steady foundation upon which the family built their lives. He managed the ranch, ensuring they had the income to support the sanctuary. He built new facilities as needed, repaired fences, and worked with the horses that remained his first love. And every evening he made sure to spend time with Lily, walking the sanctuary grounds together, checking on the animals, talking about their day. In 1908, Arizona Territorial Governor visited Oro Blanco and specifically requested a tour of the Irving Sanctuary. Lily showed him around personally, explaining her methods, introducing him to animals in various stages of recovery. The governor was so impressed that he arranged for territorial funding to support their work, recognizing its value to the community and the environment. The red-tailed hawk made its final visit in the spring of 1909, 25 years after Lily had first found it injured by the creek. It was older now, its feathers showing the wear of age, but it still flew with grace and power. It landed on the fence post outside the clinic, the same spot it had chosen for its first return visit so many years ago, and Lily stood in the yard watching it, tears streaming down her face. James came to stand beside her, his hair now showing silver at the temples, his face lined with the marks of time and hard work. "It came to say goodbye," he said quietly. "I know." Lily leaned against him, watching the hawk through her tears. "I know." The hawk remained for nearly an hour, preening its feathers in the sun, occasionally turning its head to look at Lily with those golden eyes. Then, with a cry that seemed to echo across the valley, it spread its wings and took flight, rising higher and higher until it disappeared into the brilliant blue of the Arizona sky. Lily never saw it again, but she thought of it often, that beautiful wounded creature that had somehow brought James Irving into her life, that had led to everything she cherished most. In the years that followed, whenever she treated an injured bird, she remembered that first hawk, the way it had trusted her enough to let her help, the way its return visits had confirmed that healing was not just about mending bodies, but about creating connections that transcended the boundaries between species. Daniel married in 1910, bringing his wife Caroline to live on the ranch and work at the sanctuary. Rose returned from college in 1912 with a degree in biology and revolutionary ideas about wildlife conservation. Thomas sold his first illustrated medical text in 1913, beginning a career that would eventually make him famous throughout the scientific community. James and Lily watched their children build their own lives with the satisfaction of parents who had raised them well. The sanctuary continued its work, now treating hundreds of animals each year, training new wildlife rehabilitators, setting standards that would be adopted across the country as the conservation movement gained strength. On a summer evening in 1915, Lily and James sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their 50s now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work, but their love had only deepened with time. Lily's hands were still steady and gentle, still capable of calming frightened creatures and mending broken bodies. James's strength was still evident in the way he moved, though he was content now to let Daniel handle more of the physical labor. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Lily asked, taking his hand in hers. "When you saw me working with the hawk?" James smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I said you had a healer's hands. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You have healed more than just animals, Lily. You healed something in me I did not even know was broken." "We healed each other," Lily said softly. "That is what love does." Their grandchildren began arriving in 1916, with Daniel and Caroline producing a daughter they named Lillian in honor of her grandmother. More grandchildren followed in subsequent years, filling the ranch with the sounds of childhood laughter, learning the same lessons about compassion and respect for life that their parents had learned. The sanctuary celebrated its 30th anniversary in 1918, marking 3 decades of healing work. The town of Oro Blanco threw a celebration in honor of James and Lily Irving, recognizing their contributions to the community and to animal welfare. The governor sent a letter of commendation. Veterinary schools invited Lily to speak about her techniques. Young people traveled from across the country to apprentice at the sanctuary, learning from the woman whose reputation had spread far beyond the Arizona mountains. Through all the recognition and celebration, Lily remained humble, insisting she was simply doing what her mother had taught her, what felt natural and right. But those who worked with her knew better. They saw the way she connected with even the most traumatized animals, the way her presence seemed to communicate safety and trust. Daniel, trained in modern veterinary science, often said his mother knew things that could not be taught in schools, an intuitive understanding that went beyond technique or knowledge. James took semi-retirement in 1920, turning the horse operation over to Daniel while he focused on maintaining the sanctuary facilities and spending time with his grandchildren. He and Lily began taking long walks in the evenings, exploring the land they had built their life upon, reminiscing about the years behind them and planning for the years ahead. "I want to travel," Lily announced one evening as they walked along the creek where she had first found the hawk. "I want to see the ocean. I want to visit Rose in California and see the redwood forests. I want to go to Texas and see where you grew up." James pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Then that is what we will do. Daniel and Rose can manage the sanctuary for a few months. Let us go see the world before we get too old to enjoy it." They spent the summer of 1921 traveling, visiting all the places Lily had dreamed of seeing. They stood on the California coast and watched the Pacific Ocean stretch to the horizon. They walked among redwood trees so tall they seemed to touch the sky. They visited the Texas ranch where James had been born, now run by distant cousins who welcomed them with open arms. Everywhere they went, Lily found injured animals that needed help, and James laughed and built temporary enclosures while his wife worked her healing magic on birds with broken wings, rabbits caught by cats, even a sea lion pup they found stranded on a California beach. The veterinarians they worked with were amazed by Lily's skill, and several asked her to consider writing a book about her methods. When they returned to Oro Blanco in the fall, Lily began working on that book, spending her evenings writing by lamplight while James read or whittled small wooden animals for their grandchildren. The book, published in 1923 under the title Healing Hands, A Guide to Wildlife Rehabilitation, became a standard text in the emerging field of wildlife care used by rehabilitators across the country. The 1920s brought continued growth and change. The sanctuary added new facilities, including a flight cage for rehabilitating raptors, a dedicated space for treating large mammals, and a teaching classroom where apprentices learned the art and science of wildlife care. Rose married a fellow biologist in 1924 and continued her work in California while maintaining close ties to the family sanctuary. Thomas published his third illustrated medical text in 1925 and used the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in wildlife conservation. James and Lily celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1926 with a gathering that brought together family, friends, and colleagues from across the country. The couple stood before their assembled loved ones, their hands clasped together as they had been for 4 decades, and renewed the vows they had spoken in the little church in Oro Blanco so many years before. "I promise to love you for the rest of my days," James said, his voice strong despite his 65 years. "I promise to support your dreams, to stand beside you in all things, to be grateful every day for the gift of your love." "I promise to cherish you always," Lily responded, her green eyes bright with tears. "I promise to heal alongside you, to build our life together, to love you more deeply with each passing year." Their children and grandchildren witnessed these renewed vows, understanding they were seeing something rare and precious, a love that had not merely endured, but had grown richer and deeper with time. As the years of the late 1920s unfolded, James and Lily settled into a comfortable rhythm of semi-retirement. They still worked at the sanctuary, but they also made time for simple pleasures, sitting on the porch in the evenings, taking long walks through the mountains, spending time with grandchildren who now numbered 7 and showed every sign of continuing the family tradition of caring for animals. The red-tailed hawk was long gone, but its legacy lived on in the hundreds of raptors that had been treated at the sanctuary over the decades, in the techniques Lily had developed for working with birds of prey, in the very existence of the sanctuary itself. Sometimes, when Lily saw a red-tailed hawk soaring over the mountains, she would pause and watch it, remembering that day by the creek when everything had changed. In 1929, as economic troubles began affecting the nation, the sanctuary faced new challenges. Donations decreased as people struggled to make ends meet. James dipped into their savings to keep the operation running, refusing to turn away injured animals because of financial constraints. Daniel and Rose contributed what they could, and the family tightened their belts, determined to preserve what they had built. Through hard work and careful management, they weathered the storm. The sanctuary remained open, continuing its mission even as the country struggled through the Great Depression. In fact, the work became even more important, providing a source of hope and beauty during dark times. People visited the sanctuary to see the animals, to watch creatures heal and return to the wild, to be reminded that recovery was possible. James turned 70 in 1931, and the family threw a celebration that brought three generations together. He sat in a chair of honor on the porch, surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, and reflected on the remarkable life he had lived. From a solitary cowboy drifting through the territory to the patriarch of a family dedicated to healing and conservation, his journey had been shaped by one crucial moment, the day he knocked on a kitchen door and saw a woman caring for a wounded hawk. Best decision I ever made, he told Lily that night as they prepared for bed, was asking your father for work that day. Best decision I ever made, Lily replied, was letting you into my kitchen to see the hawk. They laughed together, the easy laughter of two people who had shared a lifetime of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. As they settled into bed, James held Lily close, grateful for another day with the woman who had taught him that healing was not just about mending bodies, but about opening hearts. The 1930s continued to test the family's resilience, but they met each challenge with the same determination they had always shown. The sanctuary adapted, finding new ways to generate income, partnering with universities and research institutions, hosting educational programs that brought in much-needed funding. Through it all, the core mission remained unchanged: to heal injured wildlife and return it to the wild whenever possible. Lily continued to work with animals well into her 60s, though she was more selective about which cases she took personally, focusing on the most difficult or traumatized creatures while training others to handle routine care. Her reputation had only grown over the years, and wildlife rehabilitators from across the country sought her advice on challenging cases. In 1935, the sanctuary treated its 10,000th animal, a young golden eagle that had been shot by a rancher. The rehabilitation took months, with Lily personally overseeing every aspect of the bird's care. When they finally released it in the spring of 1936, there were tears in her eyes as she watched it soar into the sky, just as there had been tears when she had released the red-tailed hawk more than 50 years earlier. Some things never change, James said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the eagle disappear into the distance. Some things should not change, Lily replied. This feeling, this joy in seeing them fly free, this is what it has always been about. The years of the late 1930s brought both loss and renewal. Two of the original ranch hands who had worked for Thomas Fairchild passed away, old men who had watched the sanctuary grow from a dream into reality. But new apprentices arrived, young people passionate about wildlife conservation, eager to learn from Lily Irving before it was too late. James's health began to decline in 1938, nothing dramatic, but a gradual slowing that concerned Lily. She insisted he see a doctor in Tucson who diagnosed a heart condition that required rest and reduced activity. James grumbled about being forced to slow down, but he complied, spending more time on the porch and less time working in the fields. Lily adjusted her schedule to spend more time with him, and they passed long hours sitting together, watching the sanctuary they had built, observing the comings and goings of animals and people. They talked about their life together, about the children and grandchildren, about what would happen to the sanctuary after they were gone. It will continue, James said with certainty. Daniel has your gift, and Rose has your passion. Between them, and all the young people you have trained, the work will go on. I know, Lily said, taking his hand. But I wanted to build it with you. Everything we have done together. And I would not change a single moment of it, James replied. Well, maybe I would have asked you to marry me sooner. Why did I wait 6 weeks? Lily laughed, the sound still bright despite her years. Because you were being respectful and proper. And because we both knew we had all the time in the world. They celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary in 1940, a quiet affair with just family present. James was frailer now, but his mind was sharp and his love for Lily burned as bright as ever. He held her hand throughout the day, reluctant to let go even for a moment, as though he knew their time together was growing short. That night, lying in the bed they had shared for more than 5 decades, James pulled Lily close and whispered, Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for teaching me that healing is the greatest gift we can offer the world. Thank you for seeing me, Lily whispered back, for seeing who I was and loving all of it, for never asking me to be anything other than myself. James Irving died peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with Lily holding his hand and their children gathered around the bed. He was 79 years old and had lived a life filled with purpose, love, and meaning. They buried him on the hillside next to Thomas Fairchild, beneath a towering ponderosa pine that James had always admired. Lily grieved deeply, feeling the loss of her partner, her best friend, the man who had built a life with her and supported every dream she had ever had. But she did not break. She had learned long ago that healing required strength, that sometimes the bravest thing was to continue living fully, even in the face of loss. She continued to work at the sanctuary, finding solace in the same work that had brought her and James together. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, making sure she was never alone for long. And sometimes, in the quiet moments of early morning or late evening, she would walk to the hillside where James was buried and sit beside his grave, telling him about the animals she had treated, about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried on the family tradition. In 1942, with World War II raging across the globe, the sanctuary faced new challenges as resources became scarce and young workers were called to military service. But Lily adapted as she always had, finding ways to continue the mission with limited supplies and staff. She trained women to do the work that men had traditionally done, creating a team of female wildlife rehabilitators who proved just as skilled and dedicated as their male counterparts. The sanctuary became a place of peace during wartime, a reminder that life and healing continued even when the world seemed consumed by violence and death. Soldiers returning from the war sometimes stopped by, finding comfort in watching the animals, in seeing the proof that broken things could be mended. Lily turned 80 in 1943, and the town of Oro Blanco declared it Lily Irving Day, celebrating a woman who had dedicated her life to healing and had inspired generations to follow in her footsteps. She accepted the honor with grace, but insisted the real credit belonged to James, to her mother, to all the people who had worked at the sanctuary over the years. "I am just one person," she told the assembled crowd. "The sanctuary is the work of hundreds of people, all of them committed to the idea that every life has value, that everything deserves a chance to heal. That is James's legacy as much as mine." The war ended in 1945, and the country began the process of healing and rebuilding. The sanctuary continued its work, treating more animals than ever as people returned to their lives and had time once again to care about the natural world. Daniel, now in his 60s, managed the day-to-day operations while Lily focused on training and education, passing on her knowledge to new generations. She published a second book in 1947, A Lifetime of Healing, which combined memoir with wildlife rehabilitation techniques. The book became a bestseller, introducing her story to readers across the country, who were moved by the tale of a young woman who had saved a wounded hawk and found love with the cowboy who saw her gift. Lily's health began to decline in 1948, her body finally showing the effects of 8 decades of hard work. She moved more slowly, tired more easily, but her hands were still steady when treating animals, her voice still calm and soothing when working with frightened creatures. She refused to fully retire, insisting she would work as long as she was able. On a spring morning in 1949, Lily was working with a young red-tailed hawk that had been brought in with a damaged wing. As she carefully splinted the wing, using techniques she had first developed 65 years earlier with another hawk, she felt a deep sense of peace. Her life had come full circle, beginning and ending with the same kind of bird, the same kind of injury, the same determination to heal. That evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Lily reflected on the remarkable journey her life had taken. From that day by the creek when a hawk had fallen from the sky, through the moment when a cowboy had told her she had healer's hands, through decades of love and work and building something meaningful, She had lived fully and without regret. "I am so grateful," she said quietly, and her children leaned close to hear. "For all of it, for your father, for this place, for every animal I have been able to help, for all of you, I have been blessed beyond measure." Daniel took his mother's hand. "You have been the blessing, Mama. Everything we are, everything we have built, comes from what you and Papa taught us." Lily smiled, thinking of James, knowing she would see him again soon. The hawk she had treated that morning would heal, just as the first hawk had healed all those years ago. It would fly free, carrying with it the gift of her care. And somewhere in the mountains, other hawks soared on the wind, their presence a testament to the work she had done, the lives she had saved, the love she had shared. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on her face, hearing the voices of her children and grandchildren around her, and knew that her life's work would continue long after she was gone. The sanctuary would endure, a living monument to the belief that every creature deserved compassion, that healing was possible, that love could transform everything. Lily Irving passed away peacefully in her sleep that night, at the age of 86, surrounded by the family she cherished. They buried her beside James on the hillside, beneath the open sky where hawks soared and mountains stood eternal. The sanctuary she had built continued its mission, treating injured wildlife and returning them to freedom, generation after generation carrying on the work she had begun. Years later, when people visited the Irving Sanctuary, they would hear the story of how it all began, with a wounded hawk that fell from the sky, with a young woman who had healing hands, with a cowboy who saw her gift and fell in love. They would hear how that love had built something lasting, something meaningful, something that continued to heal and inspire long after those who had created it were gone. The red-tailed hawks still soared over Oro Blanco, wild and free, never knowing that their kind had been the catalyst for something remarkable. But sometimes, when the wind was right and the sun was setting over the mountains, those who worked at the sanctuary would pause and watch the hawks circle overhead, and they would remember Lily and James Irving, and they would feel grateful for the legacy of healing and love that continued to touch the world. The sanctuary grew over the decades that followed, expanding its mission to include education, research, and conservation advocacy. The Irving name became synonymous with wildlife rehabilitation, with compassion, with the belief that every life mattered. Students from around the world came to study there, learning not just techniques but philosophy, not just skills but values. And through it all, the spirit of that first healing remained, a woman with gentle hands and a generous heart, a cowboy who saw her gift and cherished it, and a wounded hawk that had brought them together and changed everything. Their love story became legend, told and retold until it was impossible to separate fact from folklore. But the essential truth remained unchanged. Love heals, compassion transforms, and sometimes, when you least expect it, a wounded creature falling from the sky can lead you to everything you have ever dreamed of and more. The Irving Sanctuary stood for more than a century, treating hundreds of thousands of animals, training generations of wildlife rehabilitators, inspiring countless people to see the natural world with new eyes. And at its heart, always, was the memory of Lily and James, of healing hands and endless love, of a life built together in service to something greater than themselves. Their story ended not with sadness but with fulfillment, with the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply, that they had left the world better than they had found it, that their legacy would endure as long as hawks flew free over the Arizona mountains, and people cared enough to heal the broken things they found. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for, a life of purpose, a love that endured, and the knowledge that the work they had begun would continue long after they were gone. Lily and James Irving had found all of that and more, and their story remained a testament to the transformative power of healing, compassion, and love.